Hello, today I will be talking about Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, which was released in 1960, and fair warning, this video will contain spoilers. Psycho follows Marion Crane, who steals $40,000 from her boss after being asked to deposit the money. She then drives away from her home, buys a new car to prevent being identified, and eventually ends up at the Bates Motel in California. It is here where she meets Norman Bates, who seems friendly at first, and she also hears him arguing with his mother, who she believes lives in the house beside the motel. It is then a little bit later on in the film that one of the biggest plot twists in perhaps all of horror occurs when she is murdered halfway through the film, and for the rest of the film, Norman Bates himself becomes the protagonist. And at the end of the film, there's another massive twist when the audience learns that Norman Bates' mother has been dead for a long time, and he dresses up as her and murders people. One way this film engages with the horror genre is by speaking to the uncertainty of being human. Hitchcock approaches this by putting Norman Bates' humanity into question, since he is capable of murdering people with little to no remorse. And even though he is biologically human, he is portrayed as a monster to the audience. This can especially be seen at the end of Psycho, because even though Hitchcock provides a semblance of a reason for Norman Bates to be a murderer, from the last scene of Bates staring at the camera with his mother's skull being placed over his face, it is clear that Hitchcock wants to portray Norman as evil. Another way this film engages with the horror genre is through its iconography. We can see this from the isolated hotel Marion is staying in, the murder scene, which involves a knife and blood, and the corpse of Norman Bates' mother. Additionally, another way Psycho engages with the horror genre is through its aggressive assault on the sensibilities of the audience. The film was actually incredibly important for establishing this as a theme to the horror genre. Before Psycho, where the protagonist was literally murdered halfway through the film, the audience had the safety of believing that the protagonist would win and the monster would be destroyed, but this marked a massive shift in the genre by creating a more pessimistic theme that it is possible for evil to prevail. We can also read this as a queer film for several reasons. Firstly, and most obviously, is that Norman Bates does not conform to one gender in the film and can be viewed as a gender fluid character. More specifically, Norman Bates presents himself as the mother character, where he dresses up as his mother and believes that he is her. Additionally, we can read this as a queer film because the actor who played Norman Bates, Anthony Perkins, was queer. We can also tie this into concepts we have learned in the course because this film villainizes its queer character. Norman Bates is a reserved and soft spoken character and clearly supposed to be queer coded and is like absolutely not a hyper masculine character. This film ties his queerness into his mental illness and shows that his repressed desires leads to violence when he murders Marion. Historically, queer traits have been associated with violence, and this film definitely reinforces these stereotypes. I believe the scene at the end of the film of Norman smiling really just shows how, like, monstrous Hitchcock wanted to portray him as. But, like, despite the problematic portrayal of the film's villain, I believe there is also a lot to appreciate about this film. I honestly feel amazed every time I watch this film about how narratively inventive and ahead of its time it was. This film had a huge influence on affecting how directors approach horror films, and I will always appreciate another rewatch of it. The shower scene in this film alone altered the modern approach to horror films by allowing evil to prevail. One thing I really enjoyed about this film was its score. The string instruments in this film sound cold and harsh, and the dissonance used in the score made the moments that were supposed to feel tense significantly more effective for the audience. One example of this is when the cop car was behind Marion when she was driving with the money. The music playing in the scene and the fear that Marion clearly felt about the cop being suspicious increased audience uncomfortability. Another instance of this is in one of the most iconic moments of a dissonant score in a film, just like a horror film period, is the shower scene when Marion was killed. Additionally, one narrative device I loved about this film is its plot twist, and I think it's amazing that even though the murder occurs 45 minutes into the film, the viewer does not know that Norman Bates is the murderer until close to the very end of the film. This twist definitely contributes to the psychological elements of the film because it allows the viewer to sympathize with Bates to a certain degree when he attempts to protect his mom by covering up her murder. By covering up the murder. Ultimately, Psycho remains one of my favorite Hitchcock films, and I would recommend it to any horror fans. This film is vital to understanding the horror genre as a whole and due to its massive impact on modern horror films. Thank you.